Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński and you're watching Break the Fake. They make them, we break them, and tell you everything you need to know. Russian diplomacy has once again surprised the world. This time not with threats and ultimatums, but with a sudden display of humanism. The Russian Foreign Ministry issued a statement on the situation in Iran, emphasizing the unacceptability of attacks on civilian targets. Now, separately, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova strongly condemned the blast at a girls' school in Minab, which, by the way, Iran blamed on US and Israeli attacks, and as a result of which dozens of children have lost their lives. And here the world actually seemed to freeze for a moment, because this statement comes from a country that has been systematically shelling Ukrainian cities with missiles, bombs and drones for more than 4 years.
Обеспокоенные разрастанием вооруженной конфронтации вследствие агрессии США и Израиля против Ирана на весь регион Ближнего Востока. Стало очевидно, что помимо смены режима в Иране с использованием самых нечистоплотных средств, таких как убийство руководства суверенного государства, Вашингтон и Тель-Авив пытаются спровоцировать срыв процесса нормализации отношений между Ираном и арабскими соседями. Со своей стороны выступаем за немедленное прекращение всеми сторонами боевых действий и принятие в качестве безусловного приоритета исчерпывающих мер по обеспечению безопасности мирного населения и гражданской инфраструктуры во всех странах региона. Решительного осуждения заслуживает удар по школе для девочек в иранском городе Минабе. В результате, как вы знаете, погибли десятки невинных детей. Любые атаки по гражданским объектам, будь то в Иране или арабских странах, недопустимы и должны быть полностью исключены. Вновь настоятельно призываем стороны к отказу от силовых методов решения имеющихся разногласий и переходу к политико-дипломатическому регулированию любых вопросов при обеспечении законных интересов безопасности всех государств региона.
Words about protecting civilians ring particularly hollow against the backdrop of a war in Ukraine. Strikes on residential areas, hospitals, train stations, energy infrastructure and civilian transport have become a regular part of Russian military tactics. Russian diplomatic rhetoric has long operated on the principle of selective sympathy. If a tragedy occurs outside Russia's sphere of responsibility, arrogant statements about international law are declared. When it comes to Ukraine, however, associative phrases such as military targets or provocations are actually the norm. Now, in recent months, Russian media has been flooded with advertisements that would have seemed like satire just a few years ago, but today they are the stark reality. So here we have an ad aimed predominantly at students. And this ad says, join us after classes, assemble a few drones, and if you like it, sign a contract and go to the front line. The career path is rather short and often goes one way only. But as the ad says, it is at least dynamic. And if anybody thinks this could just be about all those little quadricopters or maybe some interceptor drones for air defense, no. This is about Shahed-type UAVs, and we know what a Shahed does. It plunges towards a target, usually a civilian one, and then explodes. Nothing defensive about it. Now, students are effectively being recruited into military production under the guise of ordinary work. The line between civilian careers and military involvement is becoming increasingly blurred, and the final thinly veiled message is, help us commit war crimes on Ukrainian civilians and we'll set you on a fast-track path towards a brighter future.
Меня зовут Дарина, мне 16 лет, и уже в следующем году я буду зарабатывать 150 тысяч рублей в месяц. Я учусь в Алабуга-Политех и работаю на самом крупном в мире заводе по производству беспилотников.
Я студент второго курса Алабуга-Политех по направлению механообработка и программирование станков с ЧПУ.
Я собираю двухтактные двигатели.
На самом крупном в мире заводе по производству беспилотников.
Здесь сконцентрированы лучшие в мире технологии.
Работая здесь, я в первую очередь помогаю своей стране.
Родители не понимали, но я пришел сюда, потому что я патриот. Моя зарплата на втором курсе 150 тысяч рублей.
На третьем курсе моя зарплата будет 350 тысяч рублей.
Поступай в Алабуга полицех.
Now, the most paradoxical thing is the tone of these videos. They try to be, motivational, but often sound alarming, even to a casual, neutral viewer. When the state begins to convince students that assembling combat drones is a normal side job between lectures, it is no longer just an advertisement for a vacancy. It is an indicator of a systemic shortage of people. Economists have long been talking about the labor shortages in Russia, a consequence of mobilization, emigration, and demographic problems. Industry, especially industry related to military production, needs people quickly and in large numbers. As a result, the focus is shifting to the easiest audience, namely students. Young people who do not yet have stable jobs are easier to attract, even if the offer in question is itself rather questionable. Also, let's not forget about the other side of the coin. When the Ukrainian army retaliates, these Russian drone assembly lines will be at the top of the target list. And that, in turn, means that Moscow knows perfectly well what it's doing when it sends kids into those factories. Imagine the opportunities for fake moral outrage when a Ukrainian missile crashes into one of those assembly halls and there are casualties. So apart from being cheap labor, students in Russia are now effectively becoming human shields. Apparently Moscow couldn't get enough of the Iranian flying bombs, so now it looks to Hamas for inspiration as well. Danish intelligence services have warned of possible Russian interference in the early parliamentary elections scheduled for the 24th of March. We are not talking about tanks or missiles here. This time, the arsenal at play might be fake news, information leaks, and digital experts who suddenly become overly concerned with the future of Danish democracy. According to analysis by special services, the Kremlin may use sensitive topics, such as the issue of Greenland, for example, to create an atmosphere of uncertainty and political tension. The pattern is rather familiar. First, dubious news appears, then it is picked up by anonymous accounts, and finally, a few hours later, it seems as if the whole country is discussing the issue, an issue which, in many cases, nobody will have heard of just the day before. Now, Denmark is one of Ukraine's key partners and consistently supports sanctions against Russia. In addition, the country plays an important role in controlling sea lanes and countering the use of Russia's Shadow Fleet, a network of tankers that helps circumvent international restrictions. For Moscow, this means one thing: Copenhagen's political course must at least be disrupted. The warning from the Danish intelligence services demonstrates a new reality. Modern elections take place at polling stations, yes, but also in the information space. The main goal of interference is not necessarily to change the outcome of the vote, but to undermine confidence in democracy as such. However, there is one problem for those organizing all those disinformation campaigns. European societies are becoming increasingly adept at recognizing manipulation, which is absolutely crucial. After all, how often nowadays does some popular online influencer or commentator gets exposed as a paid imposter, or worse still, a plain old bot, guided by a country that suddenly cares so much about democracy, even though it never practices it at home? And with this, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news, updates, and commentary.